Two people sign divorce papers and walk out of the courthouse free at last. Except they cannot afford to leave each other. Instead of moving on, they move back into the same house, forced into a new kind of intimacy as ex-spouses turned reluctant roommates. What begins with petty battles over fridge space and slammed doors twists into something stranger: comfort, laughter, and an uncomfortable question neither expected. Did they fall out of love, or did marriage itself break them? This is not a story about endings, it's about discovering love in reverse. Let's begin the story. The courthouse doors swing shut behind Rachel as she walks into the pale September sunlight. Papers press against her ribs, neatly stapled proof that a 12-year marriage has ended. Ethan follows a few steps behind, shoulders stiff, gaze fixed forward as though the sidewalk offers more stability than the moment. The end of their marriage should carry finality, but the air around them feels unresolved, more pause than conclusion. The silence between them stretches until Rachel reaches the car. Their shared car, the one neither wanted to fight for because both needed it. The engine growls when Ethan turns the key, a noise too familiar, a sound that insists nothing has changed when everything has. The drive home carries an uneasy weight. Neither celebrates, neither mourns. They simply occupy the same small space, the same air, as though the divorce were just another errand. Yet Rachel feels the contradiction pounding in her chest. The papers say freedom. The steering wheel beneath Ethan's hand says captivity. The house waits, unchanged and unbothered. The lawn needs trimming. The porch light still flickers. Inside, the dog bounds forward with ecstatic energy, tail sweeping the air. The animal knows nothing of signatures and decrees. Rachel kneels, absorbing the familiar comfort of fur against her palms, while Ethan carries the mail in from the box. Their life resumes its usual rhythm before either can claim otherwise. The kitchen becomes the battleground first. Rachel slides groceries onto the counter and arranges them into separate stacks. Ethan watches and follows suit. His half, her half. Labels appear on jars and milk cartons before the week ends, black marker cutting through the illusion of unity. The refrigerator door becomes a border wall. At night, the division continues. Ethan claims the guest room, its walls still painted a faded blue from the year it served as a nursery. Rachel stays in the master bedroom, once their shared sanctuary, now hers alone. The walls echo memories she no longer wants but cannot erase. The mattress dips differently without his weight, and the silence beside her stretches like an accusation. Bills arrive and demand negotiation. Chores pile up and spark arguments, not through words but through gestures and slammed cabinet doors. Each chooses passive resistance. Rachel folds only her laundry, Ethan washes only his dishes. The air thickens with unsaid grievances, yet the house continues to hum with routine. Despite the tension, life does not collapse. Rachel works long hours at the firm, chasing promotions she once dismissed as impossible while married. Ethan spends time on freelance projects, pieces that keep money flowing but rarely fulfill him. Both chase distractions, both avoid the pull of shared history. Still, the house insists on proximity. One evening, Rachel catches herself laughing while watching a late-night show. The sound drifts through the hallway, and she hears Ethan laugh in response from his room. The moment startles her, a strange reminder that humor once bound them. The laughter dies quickly, replaced by silence heavy with recognition. Days slide into weeks. They live as reluctant roommates, orbiting the same rooms without colliding. Yet cracks form in the barriers. A storm rattles the windows one night, pulling them both to the living room. The dog whimpers, pressing against Ethan's legs until he kneels to soothe it. Rachel lights a candle when the power flickers out, and for a few minutes they sit in the same glow, staring at the shifting shadows. The moment feels less like survival and more like surrender, as though the house demands they share its shelter. Rachel lies awake that night, the hum of silence louder than the storm. She realizes the divorce freed her from promises, but not from presence. Ethan remains as constant as the creak in the floorboards and the smell of coffee at dawn. The freedom tastes unfinished, and the air between them tastes of something she cannot name. The tension does not break, not yet. Instead it lingers, subtle and stubborn, hiding beneath everyday gestures. Ethan leaves a repaired faucet without comment. Rachel folds a spare towel and places it outside his door. Neither acknowledges the kindness, but both notice. The house, still whole, binds them tighter than the papers could separate them. Chapter 1 closes not with finality, but with continuation. Two people signed away their vows, yet they remain locked in the same geography, breathing the same air, circling each other like planets refusing to drift apart. The end has not ended, and both know the real struggle waits just beyond the next sunrise. Morning rises inside the house like an uninvited guest. The coffee maker burbles, and the smell spreads through the kitchen, warm and familiar. Rachel claims her mug before work, and Ethan drifts in minutes later, reaching for his own without looking at her. Their movements cross but never touch. An uneasy choreography perfected through avoidance. The refrigerator door tells the truth no one voices. Half belongs to Rachel, lined with neat containers, fruit washed and stacked in clear boxes. The other half carries Ethan's leftovers, take-out cartons, and hastily sealed bags. Marker lines on labels cut through the illusion of family. The act of eating becomes private ritual, carried out at separate times in separate corners of the house. Evenings hold greater strain. Rachel spreads legal briefs across the dining table, drowning the surface in papers and highlighters. Ethan retreats to the guest room with his laptop glowing against the blue walls. The house divides itself, one floor into two lives. Only the dog crosses boundaries, wagging between them, collecting affection from both sides without hesitation. Conflict sharpens in subtle gestures. Rachel leaves dishes in the sink longer than usual. Ethan forgets trash day. A light bulb burns out in the hallway and stays dark for a week because neither claims responsibility. The house grows restless under the weight of small rebellions. Yet cracks in the hostility reveal something softer. One night, Rachel returns late, exhausted from a meeting, and finds Ethan asleep on the couch with the dog sprawled across his chest. She notices the calm on his face, a quiet she rarely saw in their marriage. The sight unsettles her because it feels both foreign and familiar. She tiptoes away, leaving the moment untouched but lodged in memory. The outside world complicates their uneasy peace. Rachel accepts an invitation to drinks with colleagues. She dresses carefully, eager for validation, but the evening ends in discomfort when a coworker leans too close, his interest obvious and unwelcome. She drives home unsettled, relieved by the stillness of the house even as she resents its pull. Ethan, meanwhile, experiments with dating apps. His first attempt ends abruptly when his match cancels at the last minute. He hides the disappointment, but Rachel notices the tension in his posture the next morning. Humor creeps in when least expected. A shared show plays on the television one evening, chosen not by agreement but by accident. Rachel lingers in the doorway, intending to pass through, but ends up watching from the armchair. Ethan remains on the couch. Laughter erupts from the screen, and without warning, both laugh too. The sound startles them into silence. The shared rhythm feels dangerous, like stepping onto unstable ground, yet neither moves away until the credits roll. The dog thrives on these overlaps, tail sweeping wildly whenever its humans share a room. It sprawls between them, unbothered by labels, embodying the loyalty they cannot name. Rachel notices how Ethan scratches behind the dog's ear absent-mindedly, the way he used to touch her arm without thought. She pushes the memory away, but it lingers. The house responds to their shared presence. A storm clatters against the windows one weekend, rain pouring in sheets that blur the view outside. Rachel lights candles when the power falters. Ethan searches for flashlights but ends up sitting near her in the flickering glow. The dog curls between them, shivering at the thunder. For a few hours, they live in quiet communion, listening to rain drum against the roof. Rachel feels the strange calm of old rhythms resurfacing. Ethan, relaxed in the shadows, seems more like the man she first knew than the husband she left. The candlelight softens the edges of resentment. She wonders if freedom always carries this much familiarity, if escape always circles back to where it began. When the storm ends and the lights return, the spell breaks. They retreat again to their separate corners, pretending nothing shifted. Yet the memory clings. Rachel lies awake that night, restless with the awareness that her house is not just a structure. It is a stage where endings resist completion and beginnings hover at the edges. The awkward roommate era stretches forward. They continue their routines, maintaining the fragile distance, But beneath the surface, the house breathes with unspoken tension. Conflict lingers in small acts of defiance, and relief slips through rare moments of laughter or shared survival. The balance feels temporary, a fragile truce waiting for its inevitable collapse. Chapter 2 closes with Rachel standing at the window watching the yard gleam under streetlights after the storm. The house behind her hums with divided lives, but she senses the barrier will not hold forever. The storm passed outside, but inside, another one gathers strength. Autumn deepens, and the house carries the chill of shorter days. Rachel pulls sweaters from storage and stacks them neatly on her side of the closet. Ethan drags blankets from the linen shelf and piles them across his bed. The separation continues, even in warmth, each retreating into individual spaces while the house swallows both. Work demands more of Rachel as the season progresses. Files pile higher, deadlines press tighter, and her evenings stretch late into the night. She spreads papers across the dining table, pushing aside Ethan's stray coffee mug without hesitation. He notices but does not object, retreating instead to his laptop and freelance assignments. Their silence grows heavier than argument, a silence charged with unfinished sentences neither attempts to form. The first frost arrives with sudden force, coating the windows in a fragile film. The furnace strains against the cold, humming louder than usual, and Rachel feels the draft at her ankles as she walks through the hallway. She shivers, pulls a blanket tighter, and wonders whether Ethan has noticed the same creeping chill. The storm comes a week later. Clouds roll in gray and swollen, spilling rain that pounds the roof with relentless rhythm. The power cuts out by early evening, plunging the house into shadow. Rachel fumbles for candles in the drawer, while Ethan digs through the hall closet for batteries. The dog paces nervously, nails clicking against hardwood, searching for reassurance from both. They settle into the living room, candles flickering across the coffee table, flames bending whenever the wind rattles the windows. Rachel sits cross-legged on the couch, the glow softening the fatigue etched across her face. Ethan leans against the armrest opposite, shoulders tense but posture anchored by habit. The dog presses itself between them, trembling at each rumble of thunder. The quiet between lightning strikes carries an unexpected weight. Without screens, without background noise, the air thickens with presence. Rachel studies the shifting shadows on the wall, remembering nights years ago when storms met whispered conversations and laughter under blankets. Ethan stares at the candle flame, remembering promises once spoken in the same glow. Both keep those memories locked behind still expressions, yet the silence vibrates with them. The storm grows harsher. Wind presses against the siding, trees scrape across the roof, rain splashes against glass. Rachel grips the blanket tighter, her pulse racing despite the calm she tries to project. Ethan notices the tension in her hands and passes a flashlight across the coffee table. She accepts it without a word, her fingers brushing cold metal instead of his skin. The night stretches longer than expected. Hours pass with only the storm as soundtrack, and fatigue softens their resistance. Rachel leans back against the cushions, eyes drifting closed, but her mind resists sleep. Ethan shifts to ease a cramp in his shoulder, but the movement stirs Rachel awake. Their glances meet in the dim light, a flicker of recognition that feels more intimate than touch. Unspoken resentment surfaces in that stillness. Rachel remembers late nights spent alone during their marriage, the loneliness of sharing space without connection. Ethan recalls years of feeling judged, his efforts dismissed, his failures magnified. The storm outside echoes the storm within, memories colliding with the present. Both feel the urge to speak, but silence wins again. The weight of the unsaid presses harder than thunder. Eventually the storm weakens. The wind eases, the rain lightens, and the power hums back to life. Lamps flicker on, breaking the spell. Rachel rises quickly, extinguishing candles one by one, eager to restore order. Ethan collects the flashlight and returns it to the closet. The dog sprawls across the rug, finally calm. They retreat to their separate rooms as though pulled by invisible strings, yet neither sleeps easily. Rachel lies awake, replaying the storm-lit silence, the way Ethan's presence felt both foreign and inevitable. Ethan stares at the ceiling, unsettled by the comfort of sitting near her again. Both know the night changed something, though neither admits it even to themselves. The following days carry subtle differences. Rachel catches herself watching Ethan when he makes coffee, noticing the steadiness of his hands. Ethan observes Rachel working late. The concentration on her face, familiar yet sharper than before. Small gestures creep back into their routines. A towel folded and left on a chair, a sink drained after dishes, a coat hung neatly near the door. These actions replace words, communicating without permission. The power outage lingers in memory like a wound touched too often. It remains unspoken, yet every candle on the shelf reminds Rachel of the flickering silence. Every flashlight in the closet reminds Ethan of the brush of her hand. The storm ended, but its echo continues to ripple through the house. Chapter 3 closes with Rachel standing at the window again, watching frost glitter across the yard under a pale moon. Ethan moves somewhere in the house, footsteps soft but undeniable. The sound grounds her, reminding her that freedom still includes proximity, and proximity still carries history. She breathes against the glass, watching the fog spread, and accepts that the storm outside only exposed the storm within. Winter settles over the neighborhood, heavy with frost that clings to rooftops and bends tree limbs. The house creaks beneath the weight of cold nights, each board contracting and groaning like an old body. Rachel wraps scarves around her neck before work, boots crunching across icy pavement. Ethan lingers indoors, chasing freelance deadlines under layers of sweaters. Their paths cross in doorways, in kitchens, in muted mornings. The rhythm continues, uneasy yet predictable. Outside, invitations appear. Rachel accepts an offer for drinks with colleagues after a long week. She welcomes the chance to step into warmth beyond the house, to test the edges of independence. She dresses carefully, choosing a coat that flatters rather than shields, a choice she once ignored. The evening stretches with laughter and casual conversation, yet unease lingers when one coworker leans too close, his gaze lingering longer than politeness allows. Rachel feels the trap of old patterns, attention mistaken for connection, validation that tastes bitter. She returns home past midnight, her breath clouding the frozen air, craving the silence of familiar walls. Ethan chooses distraction of a different kind. He swipes through faces on his phone, settling on one that agrees to meet. The encounter feels clumsy from the start, conversation shallow, smiles strained. Still, he brings her back to the house one evening, footsteps echoing on hardwood as the dog barks in surprise. The presence of a stranger unsettles the balance instantly. Perfume lingers in the hallway, a foreign note layered over the usual scent of coffee and paper. Rachel arrives home as the guest leaves. She opens the door to the sound of laughter fading, coat still dusted with snow, and her gaze collides with Ethan's across the entryway. He stands near the door, jacket half-zipped, posture stiff. The air between them hardens. No words pass, yet tension floods the space. Rachel hangs her coat slowly, movements deliberate, her silence louder than any confrontation. Ethan shifts uncomfortably, aware of the unspoken storm. The house absorbs the conflict. Dinner becomes colder, more mechanical. Rachel cooks quietly, eating alone at the table. Ethan orders takeout and eats in the guest room. The dog senses the rift, pacing nervously between doors, whining softly when neither offers reassurance. Small gestures reveal jealousy more clearly than arguments ever could. Rachel slams cupboards with unnecessary force, the echo sharp against winter stillness. Ethan leaves shoes scattered in the hallway, a defiance against her order. Rachel folds laundry with stiff precision, stacking only her own. Ethan ignores the overflowing trash can, refusing responsibility. The house fills with silent defiance, each action a weapon. Nights stretch heavy with unrest. Rachel lies awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of Ethan near the door with another woman. She tries to convince herself it should not matter, that their divorce freed her from such feelings. Yet the knot in her stomach refuses to loosen. Ethan sits at his desk, unable to focus on work, aware of Rachel's late-night return from the bar. He imagines her laughter, imagines her leaning toward someone else. The thought unsettles him more than expected. The tension peaks one icy evening when both occupy the living room by accident. Rachel claims the couch, curling under a blanket with a book. Ethan enters moments later, laptop in hand, clearly intending to use the space. Their eyes meet briefly before sliding away. He sits in the armchair, shoulders rigid, typing without focus. Rachel turns pages with sharp flicks, every motion a declaration of frustration. Silence fills the room, brittle and hostile. The dog curls on the rug, ears twitching at every shift in the air. The lamp hums faintly, its light harsh against drawn faces. Hours pass in fractured coexistence until Rachel closes her book with finality and retreats upstairs. Ethan exhales heavily once she disappears, the sound of release more confession than relief. The following days carry the residue of that night. They avoid each other more deliberately, schedules adjusted to minimize overlap. Yet the absence feels louder than presence. Rachel notices the missing coffee mug in the sink, proof of Ethan's early morning exit. Ethan notices the faint perfume trail Rachel leaves in the hallway after work, a reminder of her efforts to exist outside the house. Both pretend indifference, yet both remain tethered by awareness. The house holds them captive in its routines. Bills still arrive, snow still requires shoveling, the furnace still hums, demanding maintenance. They continue to share responsibility, grudgingly and mechanically, because survival insists on cooperation. Each task becomes an unspoken truce, a momentary pause in silent conflict. Chapter 4 closes with Rachel standing at her bedroom window, watching snow fall under the glow of a streetlight. Ethan sits in the guest room below, staring at the same storm through a different pane of glass. They occupy separate worlds within the same structure, yet the weather outside reflects the truth within. Cold, relentless, beautiful in its brutality. Both sense that the wall between them cannot hold forever. The new year arrives under a sky drained of color. Ice laces the branches outside the windows, and the house stands quiet in the sharp cold. Rachel wakes early, moving through the kitchen with purposeful steps. She brews coffee, the smell filling the air, and sets 2 mugs on the counter without calculation. Ethan enters minutes later, hair unkempt, posture heavy with fatigue. He pauses at the sight of both mugs, then takes one without question. The exchange feels like a truce, fragile but real. The silence between them shifts in tone. It no longer bristles with hostility, it stretches with possibility. Rachel notices the way Ethan leans against the counter, shoulders less tense than weeks before. Ethan notices the calm in Rachel's movements, the absence of sharp edges in her routine. Their shared presence carries weight, but the heaviness softens, replaced by a tentative rhythm. Winter routines demand cooperation. Snow piles along the driveway, and they work together to clear it, shovels scraping in alternating strokes. The rhythm becomes almost synchronized, breath-fogging in the same cold air. Neither acknowledges the teamwork, but both feel the efficiency, the strange comfort of shared labor. Inside, boots drip on the mat, coats hang side by side, and the house breathes easier for the first time in weeks. Small gestures bridge the distance further. Rachel cooks soup one evening and leaves a portion on the counter. Ethan repairs a broken cabinet door without being asked. Rachel folds an extra towel into the laundry stack. Ethan restocks the coffee beans before they run out. Each act carries a quiet acknowledgement. Hostility no longer serves them, and neither wishes to continue the war. The dog senses the shift before either does. It sprawls happily in the living room, tail sweeping the rug when both settle into the same space. Rachel reads on the couch while Ethan works in the armchair, the silence companionable rather than sharp. Candles burn for atmosphere rather than necessity, their flames steady in the absence of storms. Rachel reflects on the path behind them. The divorce freed her from obligations that once felt suffocating, yet living apart never became reality. Proximity forced recognition. The problem was never entirely him, never entirely her, but the weight of expectations stacked higher than either could hold. Without the title, without the demand of vows, she feels lighter. Yet the presence beside her feels steady, necessary, undeniable. Ethan reflects similarly, recognizing how resentment clouded years of partnership. He once viewed Rachel as judge, critic, obstacle. Now, stripped of obligation, he sees her as she is. Ambitious, relentless, sharp with focus yet softened by rare moments of laughter. He feels drawn not by duty but by choice, and the choice surprises him. Conflict still lingers at the edges, but it no longer dominates. When Rachel returns late one night, Ethan has left a light on in the hallway. When Ethan forgets to unload the dishwasher, Rachel completes the task without silent fury. Each recognizes imperfection yet chooses patience. The house shifts accordingly, warmer, quieter, balanced. The decision arrives not in a single dramatic moment, but in a series of small acknowledgments. They no longer pretend indifference. They no longer act solely in defiance. They inhabit the same space with intention, accepting the paradox, divorced yet bound, separate yet entwined. One Sunday morning, Rachel finds Ethan already in the kitchen, pancakes smoking slightly on the skillet. He scrapes the burnt edges, muttering under his breath though no words reach her ears. She sets plates on the table, steady and unhurried. The dog circles eagerly, waiting for scraps. The scene feels ordinary, yet extraordinary in its simplicity. Shared routine without expectation, shared care without chains. Rachel eats slowly, aware of the quiet hum of the furnace, the soft clink of cutlery, the steam rising from coffee. Ethan eats across from her, glancing up briefly, meeting her gaze without flinching. The moment holds weight, not as a return to marriage, not as a promise of forever, but as an acknowledgement of now. Choice replaces obligation. Presence replaces performance. The chapter closes with sunlight spilling across the table, melting frost from the windows. The house no longer feels divided. It holds two people who ended their marriage, yet found connection again in the aftermath, redefined and reshaped. Love returns, not recycled but rewritten, free from the chains that once suffocated it. Thanks for listening. Hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe.